Got this thing all printed and it's ready to go. So here we've got a 16 by 24 inch cargo ship that we're going to be printing today. This is for a repeat customer that we've had one other time. The photo's been really cool. He's been waiting over a month to get it, and so we're going to do this now. I've been pretty backed up with moving shops and waiting on material and everything, and so I haven't been able to actually do a handful of orders that were supposed to go out quite a while ago. And so now we're finally getting around to doing them and getting them done. Show you what it looks like before we actually put it on the metal here. For anyone that wonders why it's matte, it's because the paper is matte, and when it's pressed onto a panel, it will then be a gloss white finish. What we need is a panel out of here. Let's get at it. So just got this plastic coating that has to come off here. And once it's off, then it can get laid over the paper. So that is so loud inside the warehouse, it echoes the entire place. One thing I do is I just always inspect the panel to make sure everything looks good on it. There's not really any blemishes on it. And it looks pretty good. It's so strange working in this warehouse. There's like hardly anyone here. I mean, this place is huge. It goes forever. You can't tell in this video. But there are no lights on out there. And honestly, there never is. There's usually like one person here working at a time. So this photo is ready now to put this panel on. So just gotta make sure everything is clean. You wanna make sure there's no dust on it. And once it is good, then you just take this. If you've watched any of these videos, you've seen this 100 times, but you just lay this right over the top and you leave a bleed edge so that when the aluminum expands, it doesn't expand past the image and create a white border around it instead. And this photo has a little name tag at the bottom of it, a little signature from the photographer. And so I gotta make sure that it's actually lined up correctly so that the name sits in the bottom properly. All right, looks good. And then I'm just gonna take this heat tape, put it all the way around. I'm gonna try doing 4 sides instead of all 4 sides and 4 corners to see if we can release some moisture when it's pressing, because I seem to be getting some moisture in the press and I want to see if that'll help. Maybe the tape is a little too tight at times, so we're going to try something just a little bit different. It may not work, but I was doing a little bit of reading about taping too tightly, and sometimes that can be an issue, so I want to try this and see if it'll make a difference at all. There's a common issue with this with moistures inside the heat press when you're pressing, and so that's like a big thing you don't want in there, because it gets between the image and the aluminum, and then it creates this hazy effect on top, and it can mess it all up. And so the goal is to make sure everything is as dry as possible, or at least that moisture is being released from it when it's pressing. At least it's what I've gathered so far. I'm not much of an expert on this, really. The next thing we're going to do here is just turn this thing on, 73% still, and I go over here and I press this. It turns on the 240 volt power. Let that kick on for a second, and then I can go right over to here and flip that switch, and this thing is ready to heat up. Next, we just need a little bit of this heat paper that's going to go inside the heat press on the bottom. This just keeps it off the pad so it doesn't get any ink on it. I usually cut it at about 34 inches. It's good to go. This right in here. Gotta make sure everything's covered. I cut it a little extra so that when it folds over, it kind of rounds the corners on it so it holds. And lay this in here. This right over the top, and this allows the moisture to hopefully escape better. And I'm just waiting for this to get fully up to temp. The only thing I'm worried about is this thing is dying pretty quick. It's got 27% left. It's dropped 50% in the warm-up, so hopefully once it gets up to temp, it will stop pulling. For some reason, it didn't draw nearly that much yesterday when it was warming up. It drew about 20% to warm up and then another 3% to run, but now it's running a little extra, so hopefully we don't run out of time and this thing dies midway through a press. We'll see how it goes. Next, we need the frames for this, so we're gonna grab 2 of these 20-inch ones, and then 2 of these over here, which are, I think, 14-inch. These are what I use, all 4 pieces. Okay, this thing's all done here. Pull that off. Yeah, you can see a lot of moisture in here. I'm hoping some of it escaped. I could see it on the pad when I just opened it up. It was almost like a puddle of it. So hopefully this thing looks good. Pull it out, try not to burn my arm. This thing did pretty good. Once it was actually heated up to temp, it only drew about 3%. So as long as it gets up to temp, then it really doesn't draw anything. I am going to plug it in though, because that will definitely not last another day. It's kind of interesting here. I pulled these pads out, and this whole thing is actually really wet. I don't know if you can see it on my hand, but you can see the moisture on my hand because of just how wet this top plate is, or this bottom plate. So I wonder if there's a way that I can put something in here to kind of keep moisture from staying in and kind of getting out, or maybe removing that yellow pad or something. I'm not really sure yet. One of my goals this year is to take these frames, go down to a frame shop, find someone down here in Charleston that can actually remake them. And so I don't have to order them from China. I could just get them from like a local supplier, which would be a lot nicer. I'd even be willing to pay maybe a little bit more to do it, even though it's pretty expensive from China already. But it'd be nice to just have something local so that I don't have to deal with customs or anything like that. Don't have to wait on shipping. I could just go over and pick it up, which there's a lot of frame shops here, so I might be able to find something. Another thing I've been looking into is there's a Grimco and a bunch of other sign suppliers down here. So if I want to start doing like signs on top of these metal prints and everything, which is kind of a direction I like the idea of moving towards, is just doing signage all around at some point, not yet. I have access to that, which is really nice. And anyone down here in Charleston, South Carolina that's got a sign shop and wants me to come check it out, I'd be happy to, and come learn from you and see everything that you do. I'd love to come just spend a day there and just see everything that goes on. I've never really done it. I got offered to buy a sign business when I was back home in New Hampshire, but it was very complex. There was a lot going on, and I didn't have the money for it necessarily. But it was really cool being there, and I was pretty interested in it. And when I left there, that's what actually led me to start doing more sign stuff instead. I decided to kind of do my own thing instead of buying into somewhere, which I'm happy about now, but at the same time, I would have had a fully established business at the time. Skill-wise, probably was not anywhere near ready to do that anyway, so it's probably a good thing in the end, because I actually have zero experience with printing or sign making or anything. Everything that I do is just kind of, I taught myself from the computer or just trial and error, which is pretty limited knowledge if you really think about it. There's people who have way, way more experience than me and do this on a far bigger and better scale. But my goal is just to do really good work and try to keep getting better at it so that it just keeps getting better over time. And if I do that, then I'm good. I don't really have to worry about a whole lot else. Something I've been thinking about lately is diversifying a little bit in terms of signage. So the only thing I do right now is these metal prints. And I'll show you this one when we put the frame on. I'll show you at the very end. Wow, that came out really good. I'm happy with that. But one issue I run into is that when something is sold out like a frame, then my hands are pretty much tied and I can't sell anything. And so what happens is I end up shutting the website down and having to wait until stuff comes in. But if I was doing more different types of signs, like just a handful of different stuff like a sign shop would, then if one thing's not in, then I would have other things that I would still be able to sell and keep going with. Also with signage, you run into the thing where it's more needed than it is wanted at times, right? If the business is opening, you have a sign. If the business is closing, you have a sign. Versus a metal print is just a want, right? You don't need it for anything. It's just a picture. You just want it. And so if I had more options of things that were needed, that might be a little bit more beneficial. I could be wrong on this, which is why I'm not jumping into anything yet, just kind of tossing the idea around of doing a little bit more different types of signs and whatnot to kind of just diversify, help myself kind of stay busy and give customers more options. The only thing that keeps me from doing that like right away is I like to make sure that I get pretty good at one thing before I move on to the next. And so I don't want to just like have 100 different things that I'm brand new with and don't know what I'm doing. I would rather get really good with these metal prints first and then offer another thing and then another thing and then another thing, versus just dropping it all at once and trying to figure it out. I don't think is a great strategy because you end up making really poor products. For anyone who's seen some of my maybe older videos or even maybe a little bit more recent, I used to do street signs and stuff, which is something I would kind of like to bring back to an extent, but I'm more thinking on the lines of like printed signs and whatnot. I had a big roll-in printer for a minute, but it didn't work right and I couldn't have taken it with me, so none of it worked. So I actually ended up selling it and not doing anything with it. But if I was to start over again, I would probably buy a cutter, buy a cheaper printer, wouldn't buy one so expensive and big. I would just start smaller, something used, and just go from there and kind of work my way into it so I could learn it. Basically the same thing I did with these metal prints. One thing I have noticed about being down here in Charleston is there's so much signage down here. There's a lot of sign shops down here as well, but there's so much work for that. I've noticed it's everywhere compared to where I was from. You don't see nearly as much. I mean, granted, there's a lot more traffic here, but there's just a much bigger opportunity when you move into these bigger cities, I guess, for stuff like that I never really understood before. I kind of just had never seen it like that. But now that I'm sort of in this world, I pay attention to it. So I pay attention to vehicle wraps and signs people have and different types of like materials they use and whatnot, because that stuff is pretty interesting to me. So we're almost done here. We're just gonna put this last 2 pieces of foam tape on. One thing I noticed, I don't know if it's because these walls are cold or what, but I tried putting them on a I tried putting this tape on a banner and then hanging it up, and it keeps falling off. And that might fall off at some point too. I don't know why, because they're just aluminum walls. Okay, so now we're gonna take these corner brackets here, and this is just gonna align the frame. I actually ended up buying the wrong size frame pieces for what I normally use. Normally it is 2 inches all the way around. Now it's a 2 inch and then 1 inch on top and bottom, which I actually think looks nicer, but I didn't mean to do it. And so that's fine by me. But I switched from using 18 by 24 inch panels down to 16 by 24, but I didn't switch the frame size. So that's what the mix-up came from. And I switched to the 16 by 24 because Chromlux doesn't sell an 18 by 24, or I couldn't find it on, I think, JP Plus or wherever I was ordering from. And so we just went with 16 by 24. All right, here is the finished product. I'm actually really happy with how this one came out. The colors look good, clarity and everything looks right. If you guys want to learn how to make these, there's a link below. You can check out the community. If you want one, you can buy one on my website as well, and I'll make you one. These just really come out great. I always like the ones with a ton of color in them. They always come out really nice. And again, to anyone in the Charleston area who's got a sign shop, if you want me to come out and check it out, I'd love to spend a couple hours there and just try to learn from you, get any information out of you that I can. I know a lot of people have reached out in the past for that, but I don't live near them. Could be beneficial for both. I'll help you with social media and you help me with printing.